My brother used to boast about his success in the financial market, without realizing that the money that made him powerful was mine. For years, he humiliated me in front of my family, saying that I didn't understand money. Little did he know that every penny of his fortune came from my work and my silence. But that night, after a single message in the family group chat, I decided to show who was really in control. And all it took was one click to destroy a lifetime of pride. He thought he was the genius of the family, until I discovered that he had always just been my employee. But what came next, nobody was prepared to see.
The brightly lit living room of the Vasconcelos house resembled a showcase of appearances. Glasses clinked, laughter echoed, and the smell of expensive wine mingled with the subtle arrogance that always hung in the air at family dinners. Carlos, the eldest brother, was at the center of the table, gesturing like a presenter before a captive audience. He spoke of high liquidity strategies and intelligent diversification, as if the market itself were paying him homage. Elena, seated to her mother's right, listened in silence. Each word from Carlos felt like a tiny needle piercing her patience. The same rehearsed speech, the same aura of superiority. She observed the reactions, her mother's proud gaze, her uncle's fake smiles, the glint of vanity on his face. No one there imagined that the empire Carlos described with such pride was, in fact, sustained by her. While her brother spoke about a new fund with surprising returns, Elena calmly stirred the wine in her glass. She thought about how many times she had been called a dreamer, irresponsible, a directionless artist. She swallowed a laugh. She knew more about that fund than anyone at the table. After all, it was hers. Carlos glanced at her, noticing her discreet smile. "And you, Elena? Still working with what exactly? Design? Psychology? Those subjective things?" His tone dripped with condescension. Shy laughter filled the air. Elena simply replied, "Something like that. But the market is good for those observing from the outside." He laughed, thinking she was apologizing. The conversation continued like a parade of egos. Carlos spoke about investments, while Elena recalled the day she almost went bankrupt and vowed never to depend on anyone again. The humiliation of 5 years ago had transformed her into something different, not just rich, but cold, the kind of person who learned to use silence as both shield and sword. As dinner ended, the mother made a toast to family pride, looking directly at Carlos. Elena merely raised her glass without uttering a word. The crystal briefly reflected her face, serene, calculated, dangerous. As she stepped outside, the São Paulo night air enveloped her with its scent of rain and concrete. She took a deep breath, gazing at the cloudy sky. She knew that soon her brother's empire of vanity would crack, and that she would be the first to hear the snap. Back in her car, she turned on her cell phone and saw the notifications from the family group chat. Photos of the dinner, compliments to Carlos, emojis of glasses and applause. No mention of her. She smiled, put her phone away, and thought, recognition is for those who need it. When he got home, the silence was comforting. He opened his laptop, connected to the system in the background, and looked at the numbers that fueled his brother's ego. Good job, Carlos. Let's see how long you can keep bragging about what's mine.
Before we continue this story, subscribe to the channel here, because sometimes the power we see isn't the real one. And in the next chapters, you'll discover what happens when silence becomes the strongest weapon. So, click here and come with me. The following morning, the insistent sound of notifications broke the silence of the apartment. Elena opened the family group chat. Dozens of messages from Carlos, boasting about charts and headlines about market volatility. He bragged about anticipating the correction, as if he were a financial oracle.
And amidst all this, a pointed, indirect message. Elena, the market is like life. It rewards those who are responsible. The words burned, not because of their content, but because of their intention. It was the same paternalistic tone as always, the same need to show superiority. She could have ignored it, as she always did, but something prevented her that day. Perhaps it was cynicism, perhaps the boredom of feigning humility. She stood up, went to the balcony, and observed the city's gray horizon. She thought about how many years she had spent hiding her business identity, protecting herself from curious glances. Her fortune had grown quietly, exactly as she wanted. But now, the feeling was one of suffocation. Carlos had turned the narrative into something personal, and Elena hated losing control of the story. She opened her laptop, accessed the fund's reports, and analyzed its performance over the past few weeks. Carlos's success, the brilliant profits he boasted so much about, stemmed directly from her decisions and those of a team he didn't even know existed. The irony was delicious, but also bitter. The phone rang. It was Roberto, the banker. "Good morning, Elena. I received a notification about yesterday's activity. Your brother requested access to supplementary reports. Would you like me to allow that?" "No. Actually, I want you to prepare something special. I need him and the whole family to receive the actual statement of the fund." On the other side, a brief silence. "Is he sure?" "Absolute." After she hung up, Elena looked at her phone screen again. Carlos was sending another message, ridiculing her unstable job and saying that the market teaches humility to those who think they know everything. She typed only one response. "You'll learn this soon, Carlos." The wind blew strongly on the balcony. Elena felt something ignite inside her, a dangerous mix of anger and freedom. For the first time, she no longer wanted to hide. While the coffee cooled, she opened her work email and wrote the final instructions for Roberto. "Send the original fund statements to the family group. All names, all amounts. Signed, E.V." And when she clicked send, Elena knew there was no going back.
That morning seemed like a mirror of the past. Elena watched the city waking up through the glass windows of her office. Each horn and siren seemed to remind her of a time when the most constant sound in her life was that of criticism. 5 years earlier, when her father died and the family business collapsed, she had been singled out as the one to blame for not understanding business. Carlos took control with the air of someone who would save everyone. Elena, silently, sold what little remained and began to build something new, an invisible empire. She worked through the night, studied the market, surrounded herself with mentors who didn't know her last name. She learned that anonymity is the greatest shield for those who truly desire power. He remembered the first time the name Carlos Vasconcelos appeared as the manager of a fund. He smiled because he knew exactly who was financing that success. It was a game of mirrors. He shone in the light while it moved the shadows. Back then, Elena still felt guilty. She believed that hiding her identity was a way to protect her brother, and perhaps it was. But now, after years of contempt and arrogance, she realized that her generosity had become a trap. The sound of a message interrupted her thoughts. It was Roberto, confirming the sending of the bank statements. "All done, Elena. Everyone received them, including your mother." She took a deep breath. What had once been fear now seemed merely inevitable. The clock read 10:12 a.m. The phone vibrated incessantly. First, messages of astonishment, then denial, finally, silence. Carlos didn't respond. The family group chat, once noisy, had become a digital tomb. Elena closed her laptop and walked to the office mirror. The reflection showed an elegant, cold, unwavering woman. But behind her eyes was a storm, a whirlwind of memories, promises, and old wounds. She remembered her father's voice. "You'll never understand the market, Elena. It's too emotional." And she smiled bitterly. Maybe the market needs a little emotion to be human. The sound of the intercom brought her back. It was Roberto, confirming the sending of the bank statements. "All done, Elena. Everyone received them, including your mother." She took a deep breath. What had once been fear now seemed merely inevitable. The clock read 10:12 a.m. The phone vibrated incessantly. First, messages of astonishment, then denial, finally, silence. Carlos didn't respond. The family group chat, once noisy, had become a digital tomb. Elena closed her laptop and walked to the office mirror. The reflection showed an elegant, cold, unwavering woman. But behind her eyes was a storm, a whirlwind of memories, promises, and old wounds. She remembered her father's voice. "You'll never understand the market, Elena. It's too emotional." And she smiled bitterly. Maybe the market needs a little emotion to be human.
The sound of the intercom brought her back. Roberto was at the entrance, bringing physical documents with signatures proving full ownership of the fund. Definitive proof that Carlos had been living a lie. As she signed the receipt, Elena realized what had begun as a fit of anger had become a point of no return. Power, once revealed, cannot be taken back.
The afternoon sun filtered through the blinds, tinging the papers on the table with gold. Elena examined each line of the reports as if they were printed memories. The fund bearing Carlos's name had yielded millions, and now the whole family knew that she was in charge. The phone rang incessantly. Mother, uncles, cousins, everyone wanted explanations, justifications, some reason to lessen the collective shame. Elena didn't answer. The only call she expected was from Carlos, and when it came, there was no anger, only a heavy silence. "Did you do this out of revenge?" he asked. His voice was cold, but cracked. "No," Elena replied calmly. "I did it because you forgot that arrogance is also a form of lying." On the other end, a metallic sound, perhaps a glass falling. Then the call ended abruptly. Roberto appeared in the office shortly after. "You understand what started, don't you? This isn't just about money, Elena. It's about power, and power, once exposed, attracts enemies." She stood up and stared at him. "I know, but I'm tired of living hidden behind someone else's incompetence." Outside, cameras were already crowding the sidewalk. Journalists were talking about the mysterious billionaire who controlled international funds under secret identities. Elena's image, previously invisible, was beginning to take shape in the public imagination. In the family group chat, her mother sent a single message. "You embarrassed her brother. Your father would be embarrassed too." She read it and remained motionless. It hurt, but not enough to stop her. She walked to the window and watched the flashes reflecting on the glass. It wasn't vanity she felt, but a strange sense of liberation. For years, she had let her family dictate her worth. Now, she dictated the tone of the narrative. Inside, a part of her was still trying to understand if this was justice or revenge. Maybe it was both. Maybe it didn't matter anymore. She closed her laptop and turned off her cell phone. Silence filled the ear again, as before. But now it was her silence, not an imposed one. As the day darkened, Elena opened a bottle of wine, poured herself a glass, and toasted herself. "To the true investor," she murmured, gazing at her reflection in the glass. "The one who bets on themselves when no one else does." The notification arrived at 6:37 p.m. The Vasconcelos family group vibrated almost simultaneously on dozens of cell phones scattered throughout Sao Paulo. The subject of the email was simple:
Consolidated reports of the Vasconcelos Prime Fund, update on ownership and profits. Elena knew that, from that moment on, nothing would ever be the same again.
Carlos was in an expensive restaurant, surrounded by friends and investors, when he opened the email. He laughed at the subject line, thinking it was just another routine update. But as the lines unfolded, the laughter died. The document displayed Elena's Vasconcelos' signature as founder and majority shareholder. His name appeared as associate manager, with no decision-making power. His friends noticed the change in his expression. "Are you all right, Carlos?" one of them asked, half laughing. He looked up, pale, and murmured, "This is a mistake. It has to be a mistake." But the mistake was too perfect to be accidental. Meanwhile, Elena watched silently from her penthouse as chaos unfolded. Notifications were popping up, messages of astonishment, disbelief, even insults. Her mother wrote, "What have you done, Elena?" Her younger brother asked, "Is this true?" And Carlos was offline. At 7:02 p.m., Elena's phone rang. It was Roberto. The press started asking questions. Someone leaked the email. She took a deep breath. Let it leak. Silence now would be cowardice. He hesitated before replying. "This is going to turn into a war, Elena." And she, without hesitation, then let them fight. At that moment, what had previously been an elegant secret turned into a public explosion. Financial Profiles began publishing the Vasconcelos Prime Fund, previously attributed to Carlos Vasconcelos, is actually founded by businesswoman Elena Vasconcelos. Her name, previously unknown, burst onto the news. The invisible billionaire, the sister who supported the genius, the hidden face behind the family's success. Headlines flashed across every screen as she poured another glass of wine and watched her vanity crumble in real time. In the middle of the night, the phone rang again. This time, it was Carlos. His voice was hoarse, trembling, but still proud. "You exposed me. You destroyed everything I built." Elena replied firmly, "No, Carlos. I only pulled back the curtain. The rest fell by itself." After hanging up, she felt something she hadn't expected. Not relief, not revenge. It was a silent emptiness. The echo of a war won before it even began. And deep down, he knew the real earthquake was yet to come. The following dawn brought more than light. It brought chaos. Newspapers splashed photos of Elena at past corporate events, cross-referencing data and contracts. The press speculated how long she had run the fund, and how much Carlos had earned simply for having the right last name. At home, her mother watched TV in shock. "That's a lie. Elena was never good with numbers," she repeated to herself, as if trying to convince the world and the mirror. The phone rang incessantly, but she didn't answer. Pride and fear mingled, and her face seemed to age with each new headline.
Carlos, for his part, went into survival mode. He tried calling lawyers, accountants, even Roberto, who refused to answer. Deep down, he knew that nothing had been done illegally. The humiliation wasn't legal, it was moral. Meanwhile, Elena sat in her office, reading the fund's impact reports. The stock value had risen 3% in less than 24 hours, fueled by curiosity and the power of her name. The irony was cruel. Carlos's collapse had made the empire even more profitable. The mother called in the early afternoon. "Why did you do this to your brother? He's devastated." "I didn't do anything, Mom. I just showed the truth." "Really? You shattered his pride." Maybe that's what had been killing him for years. The conversation ended with the dry sound of a phone being hung up. Elena took a deep breath, resting her head in her hands. For the first time in years, she felt vulnerable. Being strong is easy when no one is watching, but being strong under the world's gaze is another story. Outside, cameras waited in front of the building. Journalists shouted her name. Elena, did you know Carlos was using your fund for self-promotion? She walked past them wearing sunglasses and a discreet smile. Ask him. In the car, the cell phone vibrated with a new message from Roberto. Get ready, your brother is coming there. She didn't answer. She just looked at her reflection in the glass and murmured, it was only a matter of time. And as the elevator slowly ascended to her penthouse, she knew the confrontation wouldn't be about money, but about pride, power, and the truth she had always wanted to keep hidden. The elevator stopped on the top floor, and the doorbell echoed through the penthouse. Elena knew who it was even before looking at the screen. Carlos was at the door, his face tense, his suit rumpled, his wounded pride disguised by a cold stare. She opened the door without a word, and the silence between them was almost physical, heavy, dense, inevitable. So, that's it. You wanted to show off, steal my name, my reputation. Elena crossed her arms, serene. Steal what, Carlos? I gave you everything, even the success you claimed was yours. He laughed a short, humorless laugh. You think you understand the market because you have money, but money doesn't buy instinct.
Elena stepped forward, her gaze piercing. Instinct? You don't have instinct, Carlos. You have vanity, and vanity is the worst investment anyone can make. He watched her, his eyes welling up, but it wasn't sadness. It was humiliation. You always wanted to destroy me, he said, his voice lower. Ever since I was little, I couldn't stand seeing that I was the favorite. Elena took a deep breath, fighting back the memories. I never wanted to destroy you, Carlos. I just wanted to be seen without having to kneel. For a moment, silence filled the room. Only the sound of the rain hitting the windows accompanied the weight of the words. Carlos paced back and forth, trying to find some dignity amidst the despair. You don't understand what you've done. You exposed me to the world. Now they're going to destroy me. Elena approached slowly, with a calmness that disconcerted him. The world doesn't need to destroy you, Carlos. You did this yourself. I just removed the sheet from the top. He stopped, breathless, and stared at her with a mixture of anger and despair. So congratulations, you did it. You're the winner. No, Carlos, she replied firmly. I'm just the one who's tired of losing. He looked at the floor, his hands trembling. You'll regret this. This world is cruel, Elena, and you've just placed yourself at the center of it. Perhaps, she said, turning away toward the window. But now the center is mine, and I decide what revolves around it. Carlos stormed out, slamming the door, the sound echoing like a final period. But Elena knew this wasn't the end. It was only the beginning of a more public, dirtier, and more dangerous war. 2 days later, the name Elena Vasconcelos, it was already in all the headlines. Business channels, gossip websites, podcasts. Everyone wanted to know who the woman was who deceived the market and exposed her own brother. Public curiosity was turning into a spectacle. Carlos had completely disappeared. Rumors said he had been fired from the company where he worked as a consultant. Others said he had vanished into the countryside trying to escape the shame. His mother refused to speak to journalists and spent her days locked in the house, blaming Elena for the family's ruin. In the office, Elena observed everything with the cold expression of someone who had learned to predict setbacks before they happened. But inside, something was beginning to weigh on her. Her mother's face in the news, the criticism, the attacks on social media, the triumph was beginning to lose its appeal.
Roberto entered his office, tense. The board wants a press conference. They're saying you manipulated the market to destroy your brother. Elena looked at him calmly. And you believe that? He hesitated before answering. No, but the world believes in narratives, not truths. She stood up and walked to the window.
Down below, photographers and reporters crowded around. The sound of flashes was like a hailstorm against the glass. "They want a villain," she said. "And if I have to be the villain to keep the game going, then so be it." Meanwhile, in a small apartment in Moema, Carlos watched an interview with an economist who said, Carlos Vasconcelos was merely the public face of an empire built by his sister, a man who believed he was the architect when in reality he was just the portrait on the wall. He turned off the TV, his face covered by his hands. Social media was unforgiving. Memes, jokes, comparisons. His pride, once unwavering, was now a public ruin. And for the first time, Carlos felt what it was like to be invisible. Elena, alone in her office, watched the city lights. She thought about calling her brother, but decided against it. "He needs to fall to understand the ground," she whispered. At the same time, he received an unexpected message from Roberto. "There's something you need to see, and it's not about the press, it's about the numbers." Elena frowned, her heart racing. Numbers never lie, but sometimes they hide even more dangerous truths. The clock was almost midnight when Elena arrived at Roberto's office. The building was silent, and the sound of her heels echoed down the hallway like hurried heartbeats. He awaited her with a stack of reports on his desk and a look she had never seen on him before: guilt. "These are the bank statements for the last 12 months. There are strange transfers, small but constant." Elena picked up the papers, her heart heavy. Lines of numbers jumped before her eyes. Accounts in the name of shell companies, deposits made by Carlos, signatures authorized by third parties. A subtle and old deception. "He was stealing from me?" he asked, his voice low, almost in disbelief. Roberto took a deep breath. "Not directly. He thought he was just adjusting management margins. But the money left his fund." The words sounded like muffled gunshots. Elena sat down slowly. Her head was spinning. It wasn't just financial betrayal, it was symbolic. The brother who had always called her irresponsible had fed his own ego with her money. "And how long have you known this?" she asked, without looking up. Roberto hesitated. "I found out a few months ago. I thought it was irrelevant. But now, with everything exposed, it could compromise you too." The silence that followed was long, cutting. Elena looked at him, the only man she trusted, and saw something break between them. "You should have told me, Roberto. Trust isn't measured in spreadsheets." He tried to explain, but she interrupted him. "Get out, now!" Her tone was undeniable. Alone, she stared at the papers on the table. What had once been mere justice was beginning to transform into something darker. Revenge, control, perhaps fear. For the first time, Elena wondered if she had gone too far. Outside, the city slept, indifferent. But inside, the empire of certainties was beginning to crack. And the cracks, as always, came from within. When the clock struck 1, she picked up her cell phone and opened Carlos's contact. Her finger hovered over the call button, but she didn't press it. Instead, she sent a short message. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, at my office." She turned off the screen, took a deep breath, and for the first time, felt afraid of her own power. The following morning dawned gray, the kind of day when the sun seems to have given up. Elena arrived at the office early, but couldn't work. The reports remained there, like open wounds on the desk. The ticking of the clock seemed louder, more merciless. When Carlos entered, he looked like a different man. His beard was unshaven, his eyes sunken, his posture slumped. "Why did you call me here? To humiliate me some more?" Elena pointed to the papers, "To show you what you did." He picked up the report, read it, and turned pale. "This is absurd. I didn't know it came from there." "Yes, I knew. You always knew it too. You only pretended not to know because it was convenient." Carlos threw the papers on the table, desperate. "You don't understand. I needed to maintain the image. I needed them to believe me." Elena stared at him coldly. "You stole from me, Carlos. Not money, but the chance to believe there was still something honest between us." The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of the air conditioner. "So that's it?" he asked, exhausted. "Are you going to denounce me? Destroy me for good?" Elena approached him, her voice low but sharp. "I haven't decided yet, but now you understand what it's like to live under the shadow of a lie." Carlos took a deep breath, his eyes welling up with tears. "I never meant to hurt you. I couldn't bear to see you grow up without me." For a moment, the mask slipped. The arrogant genius gave way to a fragile, repentant, human man.
Elena looked away. Part of her wanted to forgive, but another part, the one that had built the empire alone, knew she couldn't back down. "I didn't want this, Carlos. I wanted respect, that's all." He walked to the door, his voice faltering. "Respect is the last investment one loses, Elena. And you just took mine." When he left, Elena sat down and cried for the first time in years. Silent, restrained tears, like interest on an old pain that was finally exacting its price. On my cell phone, a new message from Roberto. "The press will publish about the embezzlement. Someone leaked it." Elena closed her eyes. She understood then that the truth is never free. It always demands interest, and sometimes the price is the soul of the one who reveals it. The table was set as in the old days. Italian porcelain, crystal glasses, the smell of roast meat, and resentment hanging in the air. Her mother, Elena, had insisted that this dinner would be a fresh start, but everyone knew it was a court disguised as a reconciliation. Elena arrived last, wearing a simple black dress, elegant but discreet. Silence fell when she entered. Carlos was there, dejected, his hand trembling on the napkin. He avoided looking at her. His mother forced a stiff smile. "Children, we've suffered enough. Let's end this as a family." Elena sat down, meeting her brother's gaze. "Family isn't a magic word, Mother. It's an agreement, and ours was broken a long time ago." Dinner began tensely. His mother spoke of the public shame, his uncles asked indirect questions, and Carlos simply drank in silence, until finally he raised his voice. "You want to know the truth. The truth is that without her, none of this would exist." Everyone looked at Elena. "But she didn't do it out of love for the family. You did it out of ego." Elena looked at him serenely. "Do you really think ego is what drives me, Carlos? I built something while you were worried about applause. I didn't want fame. I wanted peace." Her mother intervened nervously. "Enough! Enough, both of you!" But the silence that followed was impossible to control. Then Elena opened her bag and took out an envelope. "Here are the fund documents, the transfers, the profits, everything. You can look. I'm not hiding anything." Carlos hesitated but took it. As he leafed through it, the color drained from his face. There was the record of the embezzlement, the evidence, the signatures, everything.
"You could destroy me with this," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "Yes," Elena replied, "but I won't." The whole room was shocked. "What do you want then?" asked her mother suspiciously. Elena took a deep breath. "I want you to stop lying. To me, to yourselves. I want that name, Vasconcelos, to mean something other than vanity again."
She stood up and raised her glass. "Starting tomorrow, half of the fund will be transferred to a social foundation. The remainder will continue to generate income, but without any of our names on it." A murmur crossed the table. Carlos stared at her, incredulous. "You're destroying the family legacy." Elena smiled slightly. "No, Carlos, I'm setting him free." The mother began to cry softly. Carlos dropped the glass, the sound of the breaking glass like a final point. Dinner ended without dessert, only with the bitter taste of truth. That night, Elena walked alone through the streets of Sao Paulo, the cold wind cutting her face. The city lights reflected in her eyes, but nothing seemed to shine. What she had finally achieved came at a price, and now she felt it in every step. The weight of what had been lost so that the truth could emerge. The phone vibrated. A short message from Roberto. "Your brother tried something. He's in the hospital." The world seemed to spin. Elena grabbed the first available car, her heart racing, her hands trembling. The silence during the ride was almost unbearable. In the hospital, the smell of disinfectant and loneliness enveloped her. Carlos was unconscious, pale, connected to tubes. His mother, in tears, looked at her with despair. "You did it, Elena! Congratulations! He couldn't take it anymore." The words pierced her chest like blades. She approached the bed, observing her brother, so fragile, so human. The man who thought himself invincible now seemed like a lost boy. She sat beside him and whispered, "I didn't want to destroy you. I just wanted you to see me." Hours passed. Carlos woke slowly, his gaze confused. When he saw Elena, he tried to turn his face away, but couldn't. "Why did you come?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "Because we're still a family. And because, despite everything, I love you. I just don't want to live in your shadow anymore." Carlos cried, a low cry without pride. "I envied you, always, because you never needed anyone's approval. And I lived for it." Elena held his hand, squeezing it tightly. "Maybe now we can start over, without masks." Outside, the sun was beginning to rise. The mother watched through the half-open door, her face tired, too weak to blame or defend. For the first time, she saw her children as they were, not as she wanted them to be. Before leaving, Elena handed her mother an envelope. "Signatures for the fund transfer. It's done." Her mother held it, tears streaming down her face. "And what are you going to do now?" she asked. Elena smiled, exhausted. "Maybe live." As she walked down the hospital corridor, the sound of her footsteps seemed lighter. For the first time in many years, Elena carried no secrets, only scars. And sometimes, scars are all that remain when the truth finally heals. The days following the dinner were a blur of silence and regret. News of Carlos's suicide attempt had leaked to the press, and cruel headlines spread. The collapse of the financial genius. The war between the Vasconcelos brothers reaches its breaking point. Elena turned off her cell phone and locked herself inside her house. The noise of the world outside seemed like a just punishment. The images of Carlos lying in the hospital wouldn't leave her mind. His empty gaze, his frail body, his mother's words echoing, he couldn't take it anymore. For the first time, the weight of the truth seemed unbearable. Discovering that he had power was easy. Dealing with what it cost was another story. Roberto tried to visit her, but she refused. She didn't want to talk about reports, funds, or the press. All of this seems so small to me now, she murmured to herself. The fortune, the prestige, the empire she had built in silence, nothing compensated for the emptiness she felt. On a rainy morning, she decided to go to the hospital. She entered through the side wing, avoiding journalists and cameras. The rhythmic sound of the monitors guided her to the room. Carlos was asleep, his face serene, almost childlike. His mother slept in an armchair beside him. Elena stopped at the door, hesitated, and went in. She sat down slowly, watching her brother's every breath. You always thought you needed to prove something, Carlos, but what you were trying to prove was never to me. It was to yourself. She lightly touched his hand, cold but alive. Minutes turned into hours. Outside, the rain beat against the windows like a sad applause. Elena closed her eyes and allowed herself to cry. Not out of guilt, but out of liberation. Tears fell silently, washing away years of pride, resentment, and silence. When the doctor came in, she wiped her face. "He'll wake up soon," the doctor said gently. Elena nodded, but she knew that Carlos's true awakening wouldn't be physical, it would be emotional. Late in the afternoon, he opened his eyes. He looked at the ceiling, then at her. "You came," he murmured weakly. "Of course I came." He tried to smile. "I thought you wanted me to disappear." She shook her head. "I just wanted you to find yourself." Carlos squeezed her hand tightly. "Forgive me?" Elena smiled sadly. "We don't need to ask for forgiveness anymore, Carlos. We just need to live what's left." And at that moment, the bond that pride had broken began, timidly, to rebuild itself.
The following days were calm. Carlos remained hospitalized, but was slowly improving. Elena visited him every morning, bringing books, newspapers, and sometimes just silence. It was a new language between them, that of care without demands, of affection without competition. The mother remained distant. She still saw Elena as the cause of everything, but without the same conviction. The woman who had once idolized Carlos now saw him as human, flawed, and that seemed more painful than the public ruin. "He was my pride," she said once, her eyes welling up with tears. "Now I just want you to live." Elena simply replied, "That's a start." At the hospital, Carlos began to truly smile. They spoke little of the past. They talked about the future, about the foundation Elena had promised to create, about his desire to teach finance in a more human way. "Maybe money serves a purpose beyond ego," he joked, and she laughed. One afternoon, as the sun streamed into the room, he looked at her and said, "You know what I realized? You were always the brains, but I was the mirror. I reflected what the world saw in me, not what I truly was." Elena replied, "And I was always the reflection of everything you despised, but needed." It was the first time they had laughed together in years. They laughed at the fights, the irony, the absurdity of having turned love into a competition. They laughed until the tears returned, this time without pain. When Carlos was discharged from the hospital, Elena took him to a small cafe away from the spotlight. "And now," he asked, gazing at the horizon. "Now we start from scratch," she replied. "No heroes, no villains." On the same day, Elena officially transferred half of the funds to the Clean Horizon Foundation, which supports low-income young entrepreneurs. The gesture was reported nationwide, but she did not give interviews. Only one sentence was released in a statement. "Wealth is not in what you have, but in what you can set free." That night, back on the rooftop, Elena gazed at the city lights. The phone rang. It was her mother.
"Can I come see you?" she asked, her voice low. Elena smiled. "Tomorrow, Mom. Tomorrow we start again." For the first time, the city seemed less cold, and in the reflection of the window, Elena saw something she hadn't seen in a long time: peace. Time passed slowly in the following weeks. The press grew tired of the scandal, and the Vasconcelos surname disappeared from the headlines, replaced by new dramas from other families. Elena could finally walk the streets without curious glances, without flashes. It was as if the world had forgotten, and she, for the first time, was grateful for the forgetting.
The Clean Horizon Foundation was taking shape. Young people from the outskirts of the city began to participate in the first mentoring programs. Carlos, thinner and quieter, participated as a consultant. He didn't give lectures, he didn't sign articles, he just listened. "It's strange to be useful in silence," he once said. Elena replied, "That's how power transforms into purpose." The mother slowly began to reconnect. A lunch here, a phone call there. There were still wounds, but there was also room for healing. "You've become too strong," she said one day. "No, Mom," Elena replied. "I just stopped trying to prove that I'm strong." In the foundation's new headquarters, a simple building, Elena walked through the corridors with a coffee in her hand. On the walls, phrases chosen by her. "Freedom is the most expensive investment. Truth pays dividends that are slow but eternal." She smiled. She knew that each word was a reminder of what she had lived through and survived. One night, while reviewing reports, a notification popped up on my phone. An email with no clear sender, with the subject line, "Horizon 2 Fund, Acquisition Proposal." Elena frowned. The body of the email was short, just one sentence. "Not all silence is peace. Sometimes it's preparation." She read it twice, feeling a familiar chill down her spine. The next day, she commented to Carlos. He chuckled softly. "Looks like someone's testing your empire, sister." She returned the smile. "Then let's see if we learn anything from this last lesson." He nodded, and the look between them spoke volumes. That night, back on the rooftop, Elena lit a candle and opened the window. The cold Sao Paulo wind touched her face. She looked at the horizon and thought about everything: the scorn, the revenge, the forgiveness. The world kept turning, and she finally didn't need to prove anything to anyone. The phone vibrated again, but this time she ignored it. She left the device on the table and closed her eyes. Silence filled the space like an invisible symphony, the kind of power you can't hear, but you can feel. Elena knew new challenges would come, because power, like the market, never sleeps. But now she had something no investment could buy: peace. And when the candle flame flickered for the last time, reflecting on the window pane, it seemed to whisper one last truth. The true empire is the one we build from within. The whole world believed she was the fragile one, until they discovered that she was the one holding everything in her hands. If you also believe the true power is what no one sees, subscribe to the channel and ring the bell, because here, each story reveals what silence tries to hide.